It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The weakened concrete behind the closure of classrooms in more than 100 schools just before the start of term. A tragedy and a wake-up call. At least 74 people are killed after a fire destroyed a multi-storey building in Johannesburg. Junior doctors and consultants announced they'll strike together for the first time in the history of the NHS.
Do you know enough about defence, Shapps?
A fifth cabinet post in 12 months for Grant Shapps as he becomes the new Defence Secretary. As new rules on police misconduct come into force, we hear from one woman exploited by the police officer meant to keep her safe. Plus...
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026?
A senior Republican freezes again on camera. We ask, can you ever be too old to run a country? And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30. Hello there, good evening. Thousands of students are facing significant disruption at the start of the new term after more than 100 schools were ordered to close classrooms because of safety concerns. The Department for Education confirmed tonight that a minority would have to relocate all of their pupils. The buildings are all believed to have been constructed using reinforced, autoclaved, aerated concrete or RAG and risk collapsing at any moment. Well, the problem has been known to the government for several years and affects buildings constructed between 1930 and 1990. 14,900 schools in England were built during that time, but only 42% of them have carried out inspections to identify the potentially dangerous material. Well, the Department for Education has identified 156 schools which need to reinforce their structures. 104 of them were told today that affected buildings would have to be shut completely, as Sky's Ashna Hurinak reports.
Schools are out for summer, but for over 100 of them in England, possibly for much longer. Those made with aerated concrete told to shut just days before the start of the new term. And this is why.
So obviously, as you can see here, I'm getting no penetration at all. However, when you look at a bit of rack concrete, it's quite clear that it doesn't take too much effort to go in 10 mil, very weak.
Warren has been testing school buildings over the past few weeks.
It could be very dangerous because they could fail without any warning. However, when you consider how many schools have rack concrete in them, we've only had one failure. But one failure is probably too many for anybody else to really take that liability and risk.
That failure was in 2018 when the roof of a primary school in Kent collapsed. What was used in post-war Britain to build cheap and fast is now too much of a risk.
Some children will be moved to another part of the building. Some of the buildings will be propped up, so the roofs will be propped up. Some of them will be having temporary classrooms. So we've got a number of different things that we've been working on. The school will be in touch. It's 156 out of our 22,500 schools. So for most people, you won't be affected.
For those who are, like this primary school in Bradford, yet more sudden disruption. Classrooms have been sectioned off, and for others, a complete school closure. Some are searching for emergency accommodation.
This has been no secret of an issue. Tens of thousands of children are attending schools built of lightweight concrete, liable to collapse at any point.
And yet school leaders have only just learned of their fate.
It's absolutely shocking that just as schools are about to return, just as children are about to go back for the new term, that ministers announce this major problem affecting so many of our schools, but they're still not being upfront about it. They should publish that full list, come clean to parents and make sure that all of our children can avoid this kind of disruption, that they've already faced so much lost learning. This has to be different.
For many, this means a return to online learning. Those who've navigated the pandemic and school strikes now start another academic year disrupted. Ashna Hurinak, Sky News.
Well, Sky Science and Technology editor Tom Clark is with me. The Education Secretary stressing this is a tiny minority of schools, though there could be more to come, of course. Nonetheless, how worried should parents be?
Well, This has been known about for a long time. You know, the fact that theoretically this stuff was losing strength over time was first flagged back in the 90s, and then more evidence emerged, probably starting about 2018 when a primary school ceiling collapsed in Kent. Fortunately, no one was there, it was a weekend, that put it high on the agenda. The government now says new cases has made them less confident that buildings should remain open. So we can only assume that as they've inspected some of these schools, they've noticed that the structural problems with this reinforced, autoclaved, aerated concrete, this lightweight form of concrete that is used as slabs in flat roof buildings, that's what they're most worried about, is a little bit worse than they thought, and that we need to do something about it. But you make the point, we don't entirely know. We haven't got a list of those schools. We know they are a tiny minority of the 22,000 nursery schools, colleges affected. But we also know that not all schools, according to the government, have filled out the survey they put out to get information. So I suppose all I would say, and I'm a parent myself, if your child is going to a flat-roofed school made of concrete built between the 1930s and 1980s, you might want to ask the school, have you been in touch with the Department of Education? Do you know what the building's made of? If they haven't, perhaps you should, maybe ask some more questions. But I think the other thing we have to reflect on is if we've got questions like that, we also have to ask why it has taken so long, 5 years, that we've really known about this acute problem, people warning about how urgent it is to remedy, that we're only finding out about it now at possibly the most stressful time for parents, teachers and pupils starting a new academic year.
Tom, thank you. To Johannesburg now, where a rundown multi-storey shelter tonight stands smouldering and blackened with soot after one of the worst fires in South Africa's history. 74 people were killed, including 12 children, many of them homeless. The country's president described the blaze as a wake-up call, as Sky's Africa correspondent Yusra El-Bahir reports.
A growing crowd is held back, and just beyond their view, blocked by a fire truck, the bodies are laid out.
Bodies piled up, and one as young as 1 year old. This is a tragedy today in Johannesburg, and you can see family members standing around the bodies waiting to identify them.
All around us, residents look on, hopeless and scared, surrounded by crumbling buildings with broken glass and rotting walls, a warning for the disaster that has now come.
And I heard the screamings and all of the people screaming, children, because there's children living there on top. So when I woke up, I saw people running around. Already the fire was not easy to stop. So me too, I wanted to take cover. I woke up my friend.
Do you have people in there that are missing? Do you know who's
Yeah, 2 of my friends.
The fire started at around 1 a.m. While some residents died from smoke inhalation, others were killed and injured from trying to jump to safety. The building in Johannesburg's central business district, the CBD, is actually a heritage site marked with a blue plaque. Once an administrative center during the apartheid era, now an informal settlement and abandoned by the city council.
Sir, has there been neglect here?
There've been neglect across the board in the city of Johannesburg.
The CBD, has it not been particularly neglected?
The CBD, there has been neglect for the longest of time. Yes. But we also have to take into consideration that this is a historical challenge that exists.
The challenges may be historic, but so too is this tragedy. Even worth a visit from South Africa's president, Cyril Ramaphosa.
It's a wake-up call for us to begin to address the situation of housing in the inner city.
The challenge may be historic, but so too is this tragedy. Veteran firemen and longtime emergency responders have told us that this is South Africa's most fatal building fire to date. A disaster that has long been threatening Johannesburg's inner city and has finally struck its most vulnerable. Yusra El-Bahir, Sky News, Johannesburg.
For the first time in the history of the NHS, junior doctors and hospital consultants will join forces for coordinated strikes over pay and working conditions. Well, the action begins on September the 19th, when consultants will deliver Christmas Day levels of staffing only. Junior doctors will join them in delivering minimum cover the following day, meaning only emergency care will be provided. All junior doctors will walk out again on the 21st and 22nd of September, and both groups will provide reduced staffing only on October the 2nd and 4th. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi reports.
Ben is in constant pain. He's been waiting for over 20 months for surgery on an abscess, but has had his procedure delayed because of NHS strikes.
It's been really frustrating, and it's had a huge impact on my life. You know, I run several businesses, but one particular business where I need to go and see people, and there have been days when I physically cannot go.
Ben's agony will almost certainly continue. Junior doctors have voted to extend their industrial action, and now, for the first time ever, they'll strike together with consultants. It means for 4 days in October, the NHS will be brought to a halt for everything except emergencies.
Both consultants and junior doctors have been ignored by our government and Mr. Sunak for, months on end, despite already having striked.
The responsibility for the huge waiting list lies squarely with the government, and the size of that waiting list is one of the drivers for consultants and junior doctors to take action.
More than 800,000 NHS appointments have had to be cancelled since health workers' strike started 8 months ago. The waiting list now stands at over 7 million. Joint strike action by consultants and junior doctors is the worst case scenario. This is what NHS trust leaders were dreading. One trust leader I spoke to said, "This is a nightmare. It simply can't be allowed to happen." But for 4 days, it is going to happen unless there's a breakthrough, and that doesn't look likely. Bringing down the waiting list is one of Rishi Sunak's key pledges. He blames the industrial action for the record numbers waiting. This joint action will put more pressure on both sides to find a resolution, and quickly.
The important thing is to say to both the government and to the doctors that we have got to see some imagination, some pragmatism, some compromise to get through this.
The Health Secretary says the strikes are disappointing and his door is open for discussions, but not about pay. His offer is final. The BMA says it will not back down. For Ben and millions of other patients, it means more agonising uncertainty. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in central London.
It's his 5th cabinet post in 12 months, and today Grant Shapps insisted it was an honour to be appointed Defence Secretary after Ben Wallace stepped down. But his promotion has been greeted with scepticism by political opponents who suggest the Prime Minister is rewarding loyalty ahead of a general election. Our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates has this report.
This is the new man entrusted with the nation's defence. One important question.
Do you know enough about defence, Grant Shapps?
Rishi Sunak has decided the answer is yes, appointing Grant Shapps as his Defence Secretary. A safety-first appointment. Mr Shapps is a long-trusted ally of the Prime Minister and a serial minister. This his 5th job in just 12 months. But there is no defence or foreign affairs experience on his CV. Defence figures for the impact of inexperience.
Now we have a new Defence Secretary who knows very little about defence, and it's a complex portfolio. It will take him quite some time to get up to speed. I think there is a risk that certainly the debate on resources for defence stagnates, at least until Grant Shapps can get his head around his portfolio.
Would you like more money for defence?
Meeting his latest set of new officials, this Defence Secretary more likely to find peace with number 10 than his predecessor. Ben Wallace was never shy to flaunt his military credentials and became the longest-serving Conservative Defence Secretary. He announced his plan to resign before the summer and quit today, with a public warning for his government. I genuinely believe that over the next decade, the world will get more insecure and more unstable. We both share the belief that now is the time to invest. That move left a vacancy at the cabinet table filled by another arch-loyalist of the Prime Minister. New Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho was only elected in 2019 and became Rishi Sunak's top aide in Parliament, now catapulted into cabinet. Rishi Sunak has promoted his closest allies into key cabinet jobs, but not everybody is happy. One Tory MP dismissed the reshuffle as uninspiring, complaining that number 10 had not dealt with more cabinet ministers that they think are problems. And bitterness is rife. One member of the government dismissed Grant Shapps as an encyclopedia salesman, a reminder that Rishi Sunak sometimes struggles to take his party with him. Labour says this reshuffle won't solve the country's problems.
I think that it doesn't matter how often they reshuffle the jobs or Rishi Sunak finds another mate to help and to give a new job to. The fact is they are just reshuffling the deck chairs. The ship is going down.
This reshuffle was much smaller than billed before the summer. Another's now expected later this year. The full reset delayed, and the Prime Minister needs his fortunes to change fast. Sam Coates, Sky News, Westminster.
When domestic abuse victim Shannon Mulhall phoned police in a vulnerable state, she expected to receive help. Instead, the officer who responded drove her to her refuge, stripped naked and took advantage of her. She recounted her experience as new rules were announced to root out rogue officers. She's been speaking to our home editor, Jason Farrell. And a warning, his report does contain details of abuse some may find distressing.
A victim of serious violence in a state of distress called the police from a church ground in Scunthorpe. Vulnerable and seeking sanctuary, Sharon Mulhall couldn't have known that the officer who would later take her to a women's refuge, PC Simon Miller, was about to grossly abuse his position of trust.
So he's gone into the back room on the left and I've gone straight into the bedroom to grab a big rucksack to start putting belongings in. I've then left to go into the kitchen area to grab some more belongings, and when I've gone back into the bedroom, he was completely naked. This was a police officer on duty, meant to protect me, and now he's naked in my refuge.
I mean, it is astonishing and shocking. And then he proceeded to have sex with you?
Yes.
Shannon said she was frightened and vulnerable, and he took advantage of her. Afterwards, she says she was disgusted, but was afraid to report it. You've got to basically go to the people who have just breached your trust, right? You've got to go to the police.
I was petrified. I didn't even ring them. I emailed them. That's
Right.
how scared I was. I emailed the police to say, I have something to report, but I'm too scared and I don't know if you believe me.
PC Simon Miller, seen here entering court when the case began, has pleaded guilty to improper exercise of police powers. The latest in a line of police officers who've brought shame to their uniform and dented trust in the police. Most notably Met Police Officer Wayne Cousins, who killed Sarah Everard, and David Carrick, who was unmasked as a serial abuser and rapist. And today the government's announced powers to remove rogue officers sooner. Those found guilty of gross misconduct will be sacked automatically. All officers who fail re-vetting will be sacked. And senior officers will now chair misconduct hearings.
The measures we're announcing this morning will make sure that there is nowhere to hide for police officers who do not deserve to wear the uniform or carry the badge.
As for Miller, he is no longer a police officer and could be sentenced to time in prison. PC Miller sniggered in the dock as Shannon read out her impact statement, but she said she needed to do this, not just for herself, but to protect other women. And that is a growing trend since the murder of Sarah Everard by a serving police officer in London. More women coming forward, and they're doing it to protect other women. Kevin Donoghue represents Shannon and specialises in cases against the police. How many cases are you getting at the moment?
With abuse specifically with police officers, we're getting at least several per week. It used to be maybe get one every few months, but now we're getting a few per week.
Right, that's a massive increase.
And these officers can come around with the protection that they can as police officers and have used and abused that. And it is done in a very underhand, very creepy way. And for me, that is planned, it's premeditated, it's sadistic.
Humberside Police recently announced it had dismissed 7 police officers for inappropriate sexist and racist messages. Misogyny and predatory behaviour has been identified as a problem within a number of forces. But it's people like Shannon who are helping root out those who shouldn't be in uniform. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
And if you've been affected by anything mentioned in Jason's report, then you can call the Samaritans on 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org. Now, Tropical Storm Idalia has left 3 people dead across the US states of Florida and Georgia. And tonight it threatens to bring life-threatening flash floods to a third, North Carolina. It was a much stronger hurricane when it first made landfall yesterday, and residents are only now beginning to assess the devastation, as our US correspondent James Matthews reports.
The shoreline at Cedar Key is where the hurricane hit. And it shows. There are signs of destruction everywhere you look here. There's a wall ripped from one holiday cottage next to the shoreline. Next door, there's no cottage at all. It was flattened by a storm surge several feet high. What do you think of all this as you look at the scene?
It's depressing. You come in, it's a little depressing. You look at it and you think, where do you start?
A cat awaited its owner in this beachfront house.
It's the storm surge that did the damage.
Chuck Adams had sat out the storm elsewhere.
Now, these are hurricane breakaway walls, so they're designed to collapse. And that's what happened, but as you can see, it just wiped out this whole ground level. It's devastating. You know, it's heartbreaking.
You get a clear sense of the power of the hurricane when you look around this coastline, the front line, when Idalia hit. This is an idyllic place. It's easy to see why people are attracted here, but it's also plain to see now the risks involved. Widespread destruction speaks to the danger. In the city of Crystal River, they conducted search and rescue by hovercraft through the streets. A very Florida solution to a Florida problem.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is what you need here for something like this, storm surge-wise. So we're doing the best we can, see what happens. Try to get as many people out as we can.
The hurricane, now weakened, has traveled offshore, having blown through Georgia and the Carolinas. Its journey continues far from these Florida shores, but Florida will never forget. James Matthews, Sky News, in Cedar Key.
It's been 4 years since upskirting has been recognised as a crime. Sky News can reveal that 40% of victims are children, some as young as 3 years old. And there's a warning tonight that the offence, which occurs when a photograph is taken under a person's clothing without their consent, can be a gateway to rape. Alice Porter has more.
Jolene was just 15 when she was a victim of upskirting. But it wasn't by a stranger, it was by a boy in her class.
He's thrown his coat on the floor and he's gone to me and said, "Oh, can you just bend over and get my coat for me?"
Photos underneath Jolene's skirt were discovered on the boy's phone by the school. They deleted the photos and didn't suspend him.
I saw him walk into school and it really shocked me, and I burst into tears straight away because I didn't want to see his face. Sorry.
Frustrated, Jolene's mother called the police. The boy was arrested and cautioned. People who upskirt take a photo or video underneath someone's clothing without them knowing. It only became a specific crime 4 years ago.
I've obtained exclusive data from police forces in England and Wales, which shows more than 40% of upskirting victims are children, and some have been recorded as being as young as 3. Despite 1,150 upskirting crimes having been recorded since it became a specific offence, only 68 people have been convicted.
The former Victims Commissioner says upskirting can lead to more serious sexual offences.
She is demeaned. Her will is absolutely irrelevant. He invades that privacy and he possesses a photograph of it. And this is probably a gateway offence to rape, and really it has to be taken much more seriously than the police or the CPS are doing at present.
A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said, "We are encouraged that 60% of offenders convicted of voyeurism in the past year received either a suspended sentence or immediate custody." But the low conviction rate may also reflect that not all allegations are taken seriously. Katie was upskirted at a car park and reported it to the police.
They just said there's nothing we can do going forward. I didn't really believe that they had tried to look into it because I'd been told by the receptionists at the shopping centre that there was CCTV all over the car park. I always wondered, like, where did those pictures go?
2 years later, Jolene is still affected.
When that happened, it did knock my confidence a lot.
Upskirting may be a relatively new offence, but it's clear greater action is needed to protect women and girls, as the impact for victims can be long-lasting. Alice Porter, Sky News.
How old is too old to run a country or even a political party? That's the question being posed yet again in the United States after senior Republican Mitch McConnell, who is 81, apparently froze for 30 seconds in front of the TV cameras. He's now facing calls to pass the torch, even as the country prepares for a likely presidential contest between the two oldest ever candidates. Here's our US correspondent, Mark Stone.
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
It is a particularly uncomfortable moment to watch. One of America's most senior politicians, freezing, apparently unable to speak for 30 seconds.
And a string of...
It is the second time in just a few weeks that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who is 81, has experienced this. After both moments, he recovered. Quite what was wrong has not been revealed, but it is raising broader, important, legitimate questions. Bluntly, how old is too old? And where does that balance lie between age and experience? The average age of senators in there is 64. Up Pennsylvania Avenue, the concern is more pronounced because President Biden will be 82 next year and he is determined to run for president again.
If he runs the next term, there's a 50% chance he'll die because of how old he is, so we don't need somebody leading our nation with that chance of him dying.
I think our representatives should be a better demographic of what we're at right now in society.
The president's age is a central attack point for Republicans and a constant concern among Democrats polled too. And Donald Trump, the current faraway favourite to challenge him, well, he is 77. Bill Galston was policy advisor to President Clinton. He likens the challenge to taking the car keys from an elderly relative.
If I had my druthers, there would be a law requiring annual physical exams for the president and many other members of the federal government, and that the results of those physical exams be made public.
Making a virtue of age worked for Ronald Reagan.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
He was 73 then, nearly a decade younger than President Biden is now. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
Abuse of power and displays of disrespect must not be tolerated. The message delivered tonight by a midfielder on the Spanish national team as she was named the Women's Footballer of the Year. The man she references, head of the Spanish Federation, is now a pariah in football after forcibly kissing a player and refusing to apologise. Luis Rubiales is still clinging onto his job, as our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports from Monaco.
The glitz and glamour of Monaco for the launch of the European football season. UEFA's leadership here for a celebration, but missing one of their vice presidents. Luis Rubiales, the Spanish Federation chief, now suspended from football for his non-consensual kiss on Jenny Hermoso's lips during the World Cup victory celebrations. Inside this UEFA ceremony, would solidarity be shown with Hermoso? Not from the UEFA president when an opportunity came.
How important is it for football to set a good example, President?
I mean, football is so powerful that everybody follows football. Whatever happens in football, good or bad, is big.
It took England manager Sarina Wiegman, after picking up a UEFA Coach of the Year award, to draw this audience's attention to the wider reckoning on sexism sparked by Rubiales in Sydney.
And it really hurts me as a coach, as a mother of two daughters, as a wife and as a human being. And it shows, we just talked about 88, the game has grown so much. but there's also still a long way to go in women's football and in society.
Wiegmann's support was appreciated by a Spanish World Cup winner after Aitana Bonmati collected UEFA's Women's Player of the Year award.
I think as a society we must not allow abuses of power in the workplace nor displays of disrespect. And I would like to say to my colleague Jenny and all other women who have suffered the same, we stand with you.
The UEFA leadership missed an opportunity at this glittering event to show any solidarity with Jenny Hermoso. Instead, it was left to the female award winners to highlight her suffering and the wider issue of sexism in football. The man running world football has now broken his silence, with FIFA President Gianni Infantino, without naming Rubiales, saying Spain's celebrations have been spoiled. Rubiales remains under a FIFA investigation, a pariah of football, but still refusing to resign as the outcry grows. Rob Harris, Sky News, Monaco.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Daily Express columnist and broadcaster, Carol Malone, who's with me here in the studio, and the Liverpool Echo's political editor, Liam Thorpe, who joins us down the line. Well, among the stories tonight, this on the front of the Eye, the headline, thousands of children face being homeschooled for weeks. That in just a moment. This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. The start of the academic year is set to be disrupted for thousands of pupils after more than 100 schools, colleges and nurseries in England were told to close some buildings over concerns about weak concrete. At least 74 people, including 12 children, have died in a fire that tore through a building in Johannesburg. And junior doctors and consultants in England will take joint strike action for the first time next month. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Express columnist and broadcaster, Karen Malone, who's here with me here in the studio, and the Liverpool Echo's political editor, Liam Thorpe, who joins us down the line. Welcome and lovely to see both of you.
Who was sitting in his corridor at home.
I know. Well, why? Yes, where are you? Should we ask?
I'd say I'm in my kitchen. It's just not as nice as Carol's.
No, it's not the kitchen. It looks like you're on the way out. It looks like there's the door.
Carol, he can't help his kitchen. Anyway, to the papers. Liam, you can formulate your answer in a minute. Anyway, front pages first. The Eye, leading with the disruption likely to be caused by the decision to close all unsafe school buildings with suspect concrete in danger of collapse. The Guardian describes the situation as the new school year is about to start as chaos. Same lead for the Daily Telegraph, which calls it the return of lockdown. The Times says head teachers were only told about the closures at the very last minute. The Express asks why, if the problem has been known about for so long, it took 5 years to act. The Daily Mail leads with news of the latest doctors' strike to be called, with the headline, "How callous can you get?" The Metro covers the death of 22-year-old volunteer soldier Sam Nui in Ukraine. The headline, "Brit gave his life to stop Putin." The Financial Times reporting on ethical concerns surrounding the Indian conglomerate Adani, in particular the alleged links between its founder and the country's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Well, more papers still to come in, no doubt. A reminder, though, for now, scan that QR code you'll see on screen during the programme. You can check out the front pages of the papers while you watch us and listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Liam Thorpe and Karen Malone. Liam, why don't you kick off then? You know, at the 11th hour, these schools being told they have to close because of the fear of this aerated concrete. You know, the question of why such urgency so late for many people.
I think that's the big question that's going to be asked of the government here. That, you know, we're just on the eve of the new autumn term starting. There's parents getting their kids ready for school, new kids starting new schools, all the nerves that come with that. And suddenly we're facing this crisis. And I think it is a pretty major scandal that, as you say, you know, we could result in thousands of pupils across England already who could face either homeschooling or disrupted learning because of what's going on, what's been found by the government. The question is, and the unions are asking, why it's taken so long and why they've had to wait just until the eve of the new term, because these concerns around the material used in the schools have actually been known for some time. It's this kind of material it was used to build schools both in the 50s and in the 90s. And the problem now is it's facing a kind of sudden potential collapse, which is obviously extremely dangerous. And the scary thing is that while 150 schools have been immediately identified, many of them haven't had the surveys done yet. So unions have described this as the tip of the iceberg. So many more schools could be closed across the country. And the disruption that will have, particularly when you think about what many of these kids have been through already, who went through the pandemic and are still trying to catch up with the learning that they missed during the pandemic, could be life-changing, really. And I think that there is a major scandal here, and the government has dropped the ball.
Yeah, and parents who can't get to work because they're at home with the kids. Testing myself here, reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete is the problem, or rack. The problem is, it was back in the late 1990s that we first heard that this had no great life expectancy. So, you know, given not all schools have been surveyed, they went back to 2018 when part of a school collapsed in Kent, luckily at a weekend. You know, there is a slowness to this, isn't there?
It's more than that. I mean, this concrete was used in the 50s and 60s, and so the fears were growing over the decades on that. And as you just said there, in 1990, it came to a head. You know, the governments, and you can't just blame the Tories, you know, subsequent governments have known about this. And it just seems astonishing to me that you know, there were 154 schools that were earmarked to be fixed immediately. Now, 52 of those have already been fixed. But it strikes me as quite bizarre that if we knew there were another 100 and odd to be done, why weren't they doing it at the start of the school holidays when the schools were closed? I mean, this is, as you just touched on there, Anna, this is going to put parents into chaos. It's going to make them furious and desperate all at the same time, because they're going to have to scramble around making alternative childcare arrangements when they don't have time. Some schools go back on Friday. I mean, this is outrageous. And, you know, I think a lot of schools were asked to, the government asked for a list of schools, but they've obviously not been pressing anyone to get this list. And suddenly this is announced today as the schools are going back. And I think what's really shocking, and I just read a line in the story tonight on the way in, it says that schools are having to foot the bill for the relocation costs themselves. It's not their fault.
But there seems to be some confusion about that. The Department for Education press release said it would be funded, but the guidance gone out to schools suggested they would have to find money for their temporary accommodation. So
they can't buy books, never mind temporary accommodation. So this is, you know, this is a whammy for everyone on every single count. And what it means is, you know, is if our kids hadn't had enough disruption to their learning, you know, in the pandemic, this is going to be, it's, you know, I think the Telegraph has described it as lockdown returns, the schools shut over fears of collapse. You know, this means that a lot of kids are going to go back to online learning again, and we saw how disastrous that was. You know, the results are still being felt 2-3 years later. And, you know, they've just almost got back to some kind of normality after the pandemic, and then there's this. It's crazy.
Yeah, and the suggestion was there was new evidence. I did read one suggestion that officials had found potential disintegration in this aerated concrete, which had not actually shown any signs. So even the bit that looks OK isn't OK, kind of thing. But who knows what the new evidence is, which would explain this sort of urgency. You know, looking at the newspaper, thousands of children face homeschooling. The Daily Telegraph, lockdown returns as schools shut over fears of collapse. The Guardian, school chaos as buildings are shut over collapse fears. I mean, all the schools around me open tomorrow, even though there's an inset day, so the teachers were due in at least. And, you know, it's just the proximity to the start of term which makes this so extraordinary, Liam.
Yeah, as Carol says, you know, they have had the perfect time to investigate this. You know, schools are closed for 6 weeks over the summer. So for school leaders and teachers to be getting this information literally a day or days before they're opening for the new term, and all the stress and the worry that comes with that anyway is unbelievable, really. And you know, the unions are saying that time has been squandered while the government tried to kind of effectively hide or keep away the reality of what was going on. And then they've been, you know, whatever this new evidence is, whatever these surveys are, they've been forced out of a, you know, really pressing emergency because, you know, from what the health and safety executive is saying, is these schools some of them could suddenly collapse. It's extremely dangerous. So they've been forced into this at the last minute. But I don't know, it feels to me like a kind of sign of a government in disarray that, yes, obviously these issues can go back many decades in terms of when these buildings were made, but just the lack of organisation, the lack of foresight, the lack of communication from a government and various departments that seem to be fairly chaotic at the moment. And as you say, it's left children and parents and teachers and school staff in absolute chaos just days before the term. It's hugely damaging.
Yes, let me just read quickly before you come in, Carol. In The Guardian, several recent collapses of RAC roof panels that appeared to be in good condition have made us less confident buildings containing RAC should remain open without extra measures in place. So it's a building fear.
But the point is, good surveyors will know all of that. I mean, as someone who's going to inspect a building, you know, we're learning it firsthand now, but good surveyors will know all that, and they should have been sent in before. But Liam's right, you know, this adds to the narrative that nothing works in this country. You know, the planes don't work, the trains don't work, you know, the schools aren't working. And it just, you know, we don't seem to, you know, this used to be a country where things got done right, and it just doesn't feel like that anymore. And it feels like no one gives a stuff if they're done right or not either. And I just think the mess over this is going to be one of the biggest stories of the next week, I think, because this disruption is catastrophic for families, for kids, for schools themselves, for the teachers. It's catastrophic.
And we'll talk a little bit later about the rotation of secretaries of state as well, which we've seen quite a lot of recently too. In the meantime, let's head to the doctor strike. Not any old doctor strike, let's be honest about it. This is a whopper, isn't it, Liam? With both junior doctors and consultants coordinating their action.
Yeah, and it's as you say, it's a big one. It is an escalation. It's the first time that junior doctors and consultants have gone out at the same time, and it is, you know, as it is intended to do. It's going to put enormous pressure on the NHS, and you know, I know me and Carol are going to disagree wholeheartedly about this, but one thing we will agree on is that it will cause a lot of pressure on the NHS, and it will lead to further missed appointments. The consultants and the junior doctors both believe that their pay and their terms have been eroded massively over the last 10 years or so. And while a lot of people say, well, doctors earn good money, and particularly consultants who can earn, you know, very good money, they have to dedicate their lives to this, and they believe that the conditions are such that people are no longer entering the profession. We've seen time and time again, the NHS is absolutely on its knees. I've reported constantly on the grim situation in our hospitals, and part of the problem here is that people aren't just being attracted anymore to work in the NHS when they can go and get much better terms abroad. I was speaking to a consultant recently who said he could go and earn much more money in America or Australia than what he can earn here, and that is a real problem. It's not just about the money that they can take themselves; it's about attracting new people to the profession.
But Liam, that applies to almost every job. You go to America, you can get more for being a journalist if you go to America. It applies everywhere. You know, presumably they didn't just come into the profession to earn shed loads of money. You know, we keep talking about how badly they're paid. You know, the doctors are holding up the sign that says, you know, £14 an hour or something. You know, let's be really clear about what junior doctors get. At the end of the first year, they're on 37 grand a year, which isn't bad. At the end of the second year, they're on 43 grand, which is actually 10% more than the average wage. So it's not terrible. And within 5 years, they're on between 56 and 63 grand. Still with the title of junior doctor.
In Britain with the longest training. That's sort of the point, isn't it?
Yes,
and I know a large portion of the salary goes on their pension, which is generous.
Well, their pension is hugely generous. They get 20% of their salary goes into their pension, when the average is 5% for everyone. So it's not a bad job. And the more experience they get, when they're earning this between 56 and 63, they've still got the word junior doctor in their name. When they get on to be more senior than that, we know what the average wage for a consultant is. It's about 128 grand, plus bonuses, plus overtime. It can be 168 grand, plus anything they do on private. These are some of the best paid people in Britain. And I know they're bright, and I know they're clever, and all the rest, but we've got to stop using this argument that they could get more money elsewhere. Well, then, you know, don't train to be a doctor in this country. Don't use the resources of this country to train, and then go to another country and give them those resources.
But it's the unsustainably long working hours and the unsustainable pressure at work, isn't it?
The doctor's life.
Yeah,
that's what a doctor does.
Just going to show you the Telegraph as well quickly. The suggestion here is that the unprecedented doctor strike is timed with the Tory party conference, quoting a deputy chair of the Conservative Party, saying the timing makes it clear their strike plans are politically motivated. The party conference will run from Sunday, October the 1st to Wednesday, October the 4th, and a rally is anticipated on the conference's doorstep. The latest take on that from the Telegraph. Anyway, lots more still to come, including the Conservatives' longest-serving Defence Secretary quits, but there are concerns over how well qualified his successor might be.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. Well, there's a real sense now that people are beginning to expect that this whole airlift is coming to an end, and they're really, really desperate. We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people and putting them into trucks.
You either live and recover, or you die.
Okay, so that's like a war.
That's the war, yes.
We help you understand the world with us. Over the past 24 hours, the soldiers have been attacked on a number of occasions. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. They were convinced the United States would become hooked. Well, they were right.
When
enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster that's just landed in between us.
The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world.
Thought I could throw a bit of paper drone. It's so hot.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview. With us once again, Liam Thorpe and Carol Malone. Welcome back to both of you. Carol, front page of The Guardian, there stands Grant Shapps, a former paper reviewer, like you both, actually, on this show, but a man who can clearly hold down a department or five in
well,
the last 12 months.
Well, no, he can't. That's the point. He's not holding anything. No, you're right. 5 jobs, 5 cabinet jobs in less than a year. It's astonishing. I had to look them up tonight. Transport, Home Secretary, Energy, Business Energy and Industry Strategy, whatever that means. And now
Home Secretary was only 5 days, though, I think, wasn't it?
Don't matter. It's a job. Well, you're saying he can hold down a job. Let's hope he was a better paper reviewer than he is minister. But it never ceases to amaze me how... I mean, I just think he's a bit of a wimpy politician. I think he's a bum-on-the-fence politician. I think he's been put there because he's a safe pair of hands, and that's not what you need in the Ministry of Defence. You know, for Shapps to replace a titan like Ben Wallace, a man who, you know, who was who had been in the military himself, who understood the military, who had massive sympathy, he knew what it needed, and he asked Rishi last year. He wanted between 8 and 11 billion extra. Rishi gave him 5, and he said you couldn't defend this country with that 5. And of course he's now gone because he couldn't stand it anymore. And they've put this nobody of a minister in who has no experience whatsoever in defence, which is terrifying when you think about it. I mean, defence is arguably one of the most, you know, important offices in the cabinet because it's the security of our country. And all he will do is do what Rishi tells him about saving money, and that's not what.
And everyone points out the complexity, not least in procurement, which is very complicated. Yes. And yet, Liam, he's been trusted by 3 different prime ministers, all of a slightly different ilk. If you look at, you know, Rishi, Liz, Boris, I mean, he's done something to impress all of them.
I think, as Carol says, he's seen as a safe, pretty underwhelming appointment altogether, I think. You know, someone who Rishi Sunak can rely on, basically. But yeah, pretty underwhelming, I think.
Yeah, well, putting in an arch loyalist, the suggestion is that there could be another reshuffle and a big one before the Queen's speech later this year in November. So we'll watch and wait for that. Anyway, let's go to the Mail. Their picture story. Yeah. What are we watching? What are we looking at here, Carol?
Well, it says here, Loch Ness, the most exciting Nessie pictures ever revealed. Now, I'm a believer. I want to believe Nessie exists. I'm looking at this, though, And it looks to me like a couple of bags of offal from the butcher's, but I'm hoping I'm wrong. I really am. You think it looks like what?
I thought it was rocks.
Liam, what do you think?
It's a seal.
Is it?
No,
It's a seal.
look at the front of its head. It looks like there's teeth there, but that could be a bit of a plastic bag. I don't know. See, it looks like there's teeth at the front. But, you know, this is great for all the Nessie businesses in Scotland because there's going to have a massive upsurge now, thank God, because, you know, sometimes it's not good for them. But I want it to be true. So it's true.
And it would be what? A relic dinosaur?
It would be a relic dinosaur that's swimming about.
There we go.
And it's never hurt anybody. It's got a right to live.
A happy dinosaur. Yes. Liam and Carol, thank you both very much indeed. See you later. Weather now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, for the showers this week, thundery rain possible in the southeast, but central Britain will have quite a cloudy and in places damp start tomorrow. Northern Scotland will see showers or longer spells of rain. The muggy south of England can expect a few thunderstorms too. Thundery downpours will threaten southeast England tomorrow morning, but the extent is a little uncertain. Elsewhere, mainly dry with sunny spells. Showers around prolonged in the north. Cloudier skies mean it will be cooler for much of southern England. The afternoon looks fine for many. Showers over central parts largely dying out. They'll keep going in the breezy northwest and the rather cloudy southeast. The Northern Isles can expect more general rain. Friday will bring sunny spells, scattering of showers to most parts, some heavy with a risk of hail and thunder. The showers concentrated in the northwest, well scattered in the southeast.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.